If you're having a hard time with centering, this is the video for you. The first 10 minutes of this video is all about centering. I've got 25 pounds altogether that I'm going to center. I'm going to take it into 4 separate sections. So each of them are an equal section, but that really does not matter. You can use how much or how little you want in each one. The goal is to get each piece centered and then bring it down to your little patty, or it looks kind of like a little cake. And then you will dry it up a little bit and get the next one on there and center it. You'll do this with all of your pieces until you have the full amount that you want. And then you're going to center it all together, and then you'll be able to start throwing. You can see that I've brought my clay down and I'm just trying to keep it all together. I've got it down to a very large hockey puck size, and then I'm going to dry it. I love these red ribs. I use them for pretty much everything, but they are so great to get this area dry. I want it dry and kind of domed up. You don't want it concaved at all, just because you don't want to trap any air when you put that next piece on. So I'm going to make sure it's domed up a little bit, applying a lot of pressure on that outside corner. Then I'm going to take that red rib right over it, get it nice and dry. I don't mind that point sticking up. That just means that I'm not going to trap air right in that center piece. Then I just slam the next piece of clay on. These are a little over 6 pounds each. And then I'm going to start centering it. To center this clay, it's so much easier to start with that top piece. And you can see here, it wasn't stuck very good. That's okay. Just slam it back down and grab it. I'm going to put a lot of pressure right on top, pushing at an angle, keeping your hands nice and wet, and you're just going to apply as much pressure as you can. I'm really pulling that clay towards me and pushing it away from me. Both hands have a job to do, and I really want to incorporate both of those pieces of clay together. Right now, I've got about a little over 12, maybe 13 pounds of clay, and I'm getting this pretty centered. The bottom half is centered. This top part can use a little bit of work. I like to pull it all together once it starts getting that wiggle out, and then push it back. I'm going to do this a few times. The key to throwing large is making sure that clay is so centered. The first half of this video is all about centering, a good 10 minutes into it. This is so important. I can't tell you how important this is, just because if you don't have this centered, then the whole time you're throwing, you're going to struggle. You're not even going to struggle, but you're going to have a poor product in the end. Making sure this is really well centered is key. So get it centered. And if you can't do all of it at once, like 25 pounds is quite a bit to center at once. So doing this in sections like this really helps. You can see I dried it, that hockey puck shape, and now I've got my paddle and I'm paddling that top part on. This will help with that centering part. So get it nice and as centered as you can with the paddle, and then you're going to really push with your left hand and pull with your right hand. As you can see, my elbow of my left hand is tucked into my body as tight as I can keep it. My right hand sticks out a little bit, but I'm really pulling that clay towards me, keeping that elbow in as much as I can just to stabilize that arm. You want your arms as stiff as you possibly can get them. Think of them as some kind of an anchor. They shouldn't be bouncing at all. Your clay, even if your clay is bouncing, your arms should not be. So really push or pull or do both at the same time, but keeping that clay nice and centered. You can see I've got 3 pieces now, and they're pretty well centered. I'm going to cone this up a little bit, and it's going to go out of whack just a little bit. That is normal. It's just going to help you get all of the clay together and get it centered. And then I'm going to bring it down. So you can see I'm pulling it in, just getting any wiggle out that I can. And then once I have it where it feels pretty stable, this is where I'm going to start pushing down. Got a little wiggle still, so bring in some more up. And then pushing at that angle right there. Try to always keep a little pressure on the top. You don't want your bat to go flying off the wheel either. And I'm just taking the side of my hand and the heel and pressing down and out. Try not to get any mushroom. So when I push down, I'm going to take my elbow and it's going to be sticking out and I'm going to pull it towards my body. This is really going to help with the pressure of pushing down. Sometimes keeping your arms tight is hard. So see that elbow? There we go. Pressing down and in. Now I'm going to keep my sides together. I'm going to take the heel in my hand, press in the center there, and pull towards the edge. You can watch my elbow stick out and then bring it into my body. Now I'm just making sure there's no mushrooming effect. We don't want any slip rings. So we're just going to really clean up our sides and make that nice and even. Pressing down, I want to get this a little bit flatter so I can get that next piece on. This is really going to help keeping it all nice and together. And this way I'm going to have nice even walls. I'm going to take my red rib over the entire thing and get it nice and dry. And you can see these little air bubbles. So with my pin tool, I like to pop those and then take that red rib again over my piece. I don't want to have to fight with any air bubbles when I'm throwing, especially when I have this much clay. So get my next piece. I'm going to just take my paddle and spank the clay. So sit here. I am going to just hit it until it is centered and doing what I want it to do. So then I'm going to start centering that, pretending like all the clay underneath it is a bat. You just kind of ignore the clay pile. It kind of looks like a little cake there, but you just ignore it, and that piece that you added, that's what you're going to concentrate on. Really concentrate on getting that nice and centered, and then you're going to concentrate on putting them all together. But right now, we're just going to pretend that pile of clay is the bat. So I'm getting this nice and centered. And after working with so much clay, this 6-piece or 7-piece clump of clay feels like nothing. So get that nice and centered, then bring it down into your little hockey puck shape. And it is just going to weld both of those pieces together. I like to take my hand over the side of it and just take off any of that slip that comes between the two. We don't want that to cause slip rings while we're throwing. So just kind of work those both together. Take the side of my hand and really push. I want all of this to be like I just centered all 25 pounds at once. And then I'm going to take it and bring it down. I don't want to start with it quite this high. It makes it really hard to make your first pull when it's so big. Your hand just can't go over all of it. So I'm going to just kind of regroup the side here and bring it down. Trying to keep any mushroom out and also removing any slurry that is on the clay. I don't want it getting too wet or it's not going to hold the shape when I do start throwing. As you can see, we're almost into 10 minutes of the throwing process, and it's all been the centering, nothing else. Centering is really key to having a good piece in the end. So concentrate on that. When you're going for a larger piece, don't get discouraged. Just sit there and do all the centering you possibly can do until it feels nice and stable. And then you can start actually creating your piece. So here now I'm going to start opening. This is a lot larger than, or taller than what I would like it to be, just because I know I'm not going to be able to get my hand wrapped around that clay. But what I'm going to do is really press down in the center, get it nice and opened. Once it is opened, then I'm going to compress. I don't want any S cracks in my piece in the end, and I want this to have minimal trimming. A lot of times with these big pieces, you have a ton of trimming. This piece is actually going to be a hug pot in the end, and so I'm not going to be able to do any trimming without losing some of the texture that our clients put into it. So I don't want to lose any of that texture or any of those imprints. So I'm going to do as much trimming and throw this as thin as I can get it at the beginning so I don't have to worry about that. But that being said, I want to make sure the bottom is nice and compressed, and like I said, no S-cracks. So get this open. Opening it up is a little bit challenging just because it is so deep. So now that I've got it open, I need to pull. I need to create a base. So you can see that both of my hands are wrapped around each other, and I'm using my body weight. I put my hands in, and then I pull back with my body. So once I get to the bottom here, you can see that my whole body, I just lean into it. That's going to really help create that opening. And here we go. I'm getting the bottom nice and even and compressed. And you can tell once I created that opening that it also threw my centering out of whack a little bit. Don't worry about that. That is so normal. You're going to get that every time you open. What you'll do to fix that is you're just going to regroup your rim. You're going to wrap your hands around it, and you're going to have to put some pressure on the outside and on the inside. As I'm doing this, I have a little bit of slurry going on here, and so I'm just going to remove that. Anything that's wet like that is just going to cause problems, and you're going to get that slip ring. So just remove that, but just grip that rim. This is just too big for my hand, and so I'm going to do it in kind of sections. You can see I'm making this pull in that top section more than the bottom. So the bottom is going to be a little thicker right there for now, but we're going to get this nice and even, so don't worry about that. I have to get my arm a little bit wet in order to get it in that piece also. So you can see I'll take my sponge and just kind of drip water on my arm. And then you can see I'm just kind of going in sections, trying to make those pulls so that I can actually get a grip on that clay. This is going to take me a few times. I'm going to use the side of my hand, my fingertips. You can see I'm really putting a lot of pressure into this because I can't do my normal donut pull because it's just way too much clay to actually be able to grab with one hand. Sometimes I'll take two hands and use them as if it was one hand. But you can see here, I'm just really applying a ton of pressure with my knuckles. And that is causing that little slip ring. I am going to end up pulling that off here. There we go. Because I don't want that stuck to the side of my pot. This is the challenging part for me. If you have more hand strength, this is going to be a lot easier for you. But anytime I have a lot of clay, this very first pull is where I struggle. Once I have that down, the rest of them are a lot easier. But just getting this initial pull is very challenging. So we're getting it. Just be patient with yourself and know that it's going to work out. It has a little rock right now, but that rock is going to be gone here shortly. So just getting that clay to be nice and even is key. Making smaller pulls is going to help a lot. And you can see that I'm really using my fingertips. You can use your fingertips, you can use a rib, you can use your knuckle, whatever works for you. And then you can see that I'm just working from the bottom up, trying to keep it nice and even, but also remember to remove any water that you get inside of your piece. We don't want this getting too wet because it's going to get really flimsy and it's not going to hold its shape. But since I got that first pull, the rest of these are going to be so much easier. Getting my hand wet so that my arm doesn't get stuck to the pot. That will rip your pot and ruin it so fast. So make sure you're dunking your arm, or like I'm doing here, I'm just taking my sponge and wetting my forearm. And then I'm making my pull. You can see my throwing rings, trying to keep those nice and tight all the way from the bottom to the top. And keeping your rim. Always make sure that you're supporting that rim somehow. And after every pull, I like to regroup it. So regroup in that rim. We've got that second pull done. Now it's getting tall. I have to get my arm wet all the way up to my elbow. So sometimes I'll just put it right in the water bucket. Other times I'll take my sponge like that and just really wring out a bunch of water on it. But whatever you do, just make sure it's wet. And then you're going to start making that pull. I'm trying to keep it up and in. If it starts pulling out, it's going to ruin the shape of this, and I'm not going to be able to get it in very easily. You could still get it in, but it's going to be a lot more challenging. So I want to keep this tall and skinny because it is going to be a vase. So I want my neck to still be a smaller diameter. So here we go. I can tell that now my arm is too short. I'm past my elbow, so I have to stand. So I'm standing up, and then I'm going to go right at the bat and press in. You can get a lot of that clay down there at that bat if you just press really hard and then start that pull. That's going to give you a lot more height. So I know a lot of people waste that clay down there. I really like to use it. So really press in when you're down at the base. Use that clay and bring it up. It's a lot more difficult when you do get about this size because it's thicker down there and it's really hard to reach, especially if your arm's not super long. So stand up. Standing up is key. Anytime your pot is longer than your forearm, you're going to have to stand up. So stand up at your wheel, press in, making sure your arm is nice and wet. You don't want it catching at all on dry skin. So making sure that you've got that moisture and then making that pull. Now you can see that I've got the height that I want and the thickness that I want. I wanted just a hair thicker than what I wanted in the end because I'm going to belly this out quite a bit. So I've got my rib, and my rib is wet. I dunked it in my bucket, and I also try to clean it off a little bit because you don't want those lines from dried up clay on there. So put my hand in there, and I'm going to really press and try to get that shape. Now I know I want this neck in a little bit, so I'm still going to use that same rib. It's my yellow rib, so it's a little firmer than the red rib. And I'm just going to get the shape that I want this. These ribs are so great. Probably one of my favorite tools and most used tools I have. If you have not tried them, I would highly suggest using them, or at least try them. But super nice. And then if you can see, the clay's got these little cracks on there. The clay is a little bit on the short side. So short means when your clay, you bend your clay and it cracks. That means you have short clay. It doesn't have the elasticity that I would like. And so I'm going to take that red rib and just go over the whole thing with it just to get those cracks out. That's not going to show in the end. It's going to be just fine. So I'm not super concerned about it. But I am concerned about this little extra weight down here at the bottom. I'll probably end up cutting some of that off with my wooden knife. But for now, I would like to be able to use it. So I'm going to press in at that base and try to pull that up and just get this pot a little bit taller with that. I hate wasting the clay, like I said. If I've centered all of this, I want to use it all. So I'm going to really work on that bottom. And then I'm going to take this red rib over it again and just kind of burnish it, get any imperfections out that I don't like. And then as you can see, I've got my wooden knife and I'm just removing any excess clay. So here we are. You can kind of see I've got just kind of making a mess here. And as you can tell, my rim, I have not flared my rim out at all yet. It is still in that very straight design, and that is not ideal in my mind. When this goes through the firing, it remembers being twisted, and that rim will end up being oblong, and I do not want that happening. So after I finish with the base here, I'm going to flare that rim a little bit. So just removing any excess that I don't like. So I always lean back a little bit to look. That really helps. It also helps if you just get off of your stool and walk away and look over at it. But, oh, and here, as you can see, I stabbed my finger right into the side. I'm not worried about it. I'm just taking that red rib and I'm going to clean up any imperfections that I did. This happens sometimes. I don't worry about it at all. I just kind of take that rib over it with the wheel turning and clean it up. After doing that, I'm going to take that yellow rib right on the inside of the pot and belly it out. So take the red one on the outside, yellow one on the inside, and you'll be able to work them both together, making sure they're straight across from each other so you have a pressure point. So now I've got this shoulder area on my pot, and I'm liking that. I think that looks pretty good. I do want to work on this rim though. So here we go. I'm just going to kind of pull this out. I'm going to speed up my wheel a little bit and then just flare it. Most of the time I'll just use my sponge and my fingertips, and this works really well. If you learned anything from this video, please subscribe, like, and follow.